A short and easy method of prayer, which all can practice very easily, and through which all can arrive in a short time to a high perfection, by Jeanne Guyon. Preface. We were not thinking in the least of giving this little work, which had been conceived in great simplicity, to the public. It had been written for a few specific people who wanted to love God with all their heart. But many people asked for copies of it, due to the usefulness that they derived from reading this little treatise. They wished to have it printed for their own satisfaction, without any aim other than that. We left it in its natural simplicity. No one else's guidance is condemned here. On the contrary, what others believe is respected. We even submit all that it contains to the censure of people with experience and doctrinal expertise. We only ask that each one not stop at the surface, but penetrate the design of the person who wrote it, which is nothing other than to impel everyone to love God and to serve him with more pleasure and success, being able to do this in a simple and easy manner suitable to the little ones who are not capable of extraordinary or learned things, but who truly want to give themselves to God for good. Those who read it are asked to read it without prejudice, and they will discover under very common expressions a hidden unction that will impel them to seek a happiness that they should all hope to possess. We use the word facility, saying that perfection is easy because it is easy to find God. This passage can be invoked. You shall seek me and shall not find me. John 7:34. However, this should not cause any difficulty because the same God, who can never contradict himself, has said, "Seek and you shall find." Matthew 7:7. The one who seeks God without wanting to leave sin does not find him because he looks for him where he is not. This is why it is added, "You will die in your sin." John 8:24. But he who truly takes pains to look for him in his heart, by sincerely leaving sin in order to approach him, will find him infallibly. A number of people have imagined devotion to be so horrible and contemplative prayer to be so extraordinary, but they have not wanted to work toward their acquisition, in desperation of ever getting to the end. But since making something difficult for oneself causes a despair of being able to succeed at it, and takes away the desire to undertake it at the same time, and when one proposes something to oneself as if it were advantageous and easy to obtain, one gives oneself to it with pleasure, and pursues it with enthusiasm, this is what obliges us to show both the advantage and the facility of this path. Oh, if we were persuaded of the goodness of God for his poor creatures, and of the desire that he has to communicate himself to them! One would not make monsters for oneself, and one would not despair so easily about obtaining a good that he fervently wishes to give us. And after he has given us his own Son, but delivered him up for us all, Romans 8:32, could he refuse us anything? Assuredly not. Only a little courage and perseverance are necessary. One has so much of these for little temporal interests, and one has none of them for the one thing that is necessary. Luke 10:42. Let those who might have difficulty believing that it is easy to find God this way not believe what they are told, but let them have the experience and judge it for themselves, and they will see that they were told quite little about it in comparison with what is there. Very dear reader, read this little work with a simple and sincere heart, with smallness of spirit, without wanting to criticize scrupulously, and you will see that you will truly find yourself in it. Receive it in the same spirit in which it is given to you, which is none other than to impel you entirely to God, without reserve, and which is not to cause you to value or esteem something, but to encourage the simple and the children to go to their Father, who loves their humble confidence, and who is greatly displeased by defiance. Do not look for anything other than the love of God, and have the simple desire for your own salvation, and you will find it assuredly following this little method without a method. We do not claim at all to raise our manner of thinking above that of others, but we speak sincerely about the experience that we have had, as much through ourselves as through other souls, and about the advantage of using this simple and naive manner in order to go to God. If we are not talking here about a variety of things that we esteem, but only about the short and easy method of prayer, it cannot address other things, only having been written for this. I am assured that if one reads it in the same spirit in which it has been written, one will find nothing shocking. One will be yet more certain of the truth that it contains, if one wants to experiment with it. It is for you, O holy child Jesus, who loved simplicity and innocence, and whose delights were to be with the children of men. Proverbs 8:31, meaning with those among men who want to become children. It is for you, I say, to prize and to give value to this little work, imprinting it in the heart, and impelling those who will read it to look for you inside themselves, where you rest as in a manger, where you desire to receive the signs of their love, and to give them your testimonies. They deprive themselves of these goods through their fault. This is your work, O child God, O uncreated love, O mute and abridged word, to make you loved, tasted, and understood. You can, and, if I dare say, you must do this through this little work, which is all to you and all for you. 1. Everyone is called to inward prayer. Everyone is capable of inward contemplative prayer, and it is a terrible shame that almost all people have it in their heads not to do it. We are all called to this prayer, as we are all called to eternal life. Contemplative prayer is nothing more than heartfelt affection and love. What is necessary is to love God and to focus on Him. St. Paul orders us to pray without ceasing, 1 Thessalonians 5:17. Our Lord says, "And what I say to you, I say to all, watch." Mark 13:33-37. Everyone can, therefore, perform contemplative prayer, and must do so. But I understand that not everyone can meditate, and very few are ready for it. Therefore, it is not this type of contemplative prayer that God asks of us, or that is desirable for you. Whoever you might be, wanting to be saved, come and practice inward prayer. You should live for contemplative prayer as you live for love. I counsel you to buy from me gold tried in the fire, that you may be made rich. Revelation 3:18. It is very easy to have these kinds of riches, and even more than you can possibly imagine. And he that thirsts, let him come, and he that will, let him take the water of life freely. Revelation 22:17. And do not amuse yourselves by digging cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. Jeremiah 2:13. Come, weakened hearts, who find nothing to make you happy, and you will be filled. Come, you who are overwhelmed with pain and suffering, you will be relieved. Come, you who are sick, and do not fear approaching him because you are filled with disease. Show him your hurt, and you will be relieved. Come, children, to your Father. He will receive you with loving arms. Come, poor lambs who have strayed and are lost. Come to your shepherd. Come, you who are uneducated and simple. You are all ready for contemplative prayer, because you who believe yourselves incapable are indeed the most ready. Come all without exception. Jesus Christ calls all of you. Let those without a heart not come, because it takes a heart to love. But who is truly without a heart? Oh, come and give this heart to God, and learn how to pray this way. All who want to experience contemplative prayer can do so. It is the key to perfection and ultimate happiness, to eliminating vice and acquiring virtue, because there is one simple thing to do: walk in the presence of God in order to be perfect. God told us so. Walk before me and be perfect. Genesis 17:1. Contemplation alone can afford you this presence and give it to you continually. It is therefore necessary to learn how to pray contemplatively, which can be done at any time and which does not depend on any particular walk of life. This includes princes, kings, clergy, priests, lawyers, soldiers, children, craftsmen, workers, women, and the sick. Indeed, everyone can perform this type of worship, my dear friends. This is not a prayer stemming from the mind, but a prayer stemming from the heart. This cannot be a mental prayer, friends, because the mind is so limited that if it is thinking about one thing, it cannot think of another at the same time. However, prayer of the heart is not interrupted by the rumblings of the mind. Nothing can interrupt prayer of the heart but uncontrollable feelings, because once we have tasted God and the sweetness of his love, it is impossible to taste anything but him. Nothing is easier than experiencing God and tasting him. He is more a part of us than we are of ourselves. He has a stronger desire to give himself to us than we have to possess him. The only way to look for him is as easy and natural as breathing the air, and is no more than that. Yes, you who are so coarse, who believe that you are not good at anything, you can live in prayer, and in God himself, as easily and continually as you live from the air you breathe. Would you then not be a criminal if you did not do this? You will undoubtedly want to learn how, and learning how is the easiest thing in the world. 2. The way to pray. There are 2 ways to introduce souls to contemplative prayer, which one can and must use for a time. One is meditation, and the other is meditative reading. Meditative reading is nothing more than taking some strong truths about theory and practice, with the latter being preferable, and to read for that end. Take whatever truth you like, then read 2 or 3 lines about it, digesting the words and tasting them, trying to take the nectar, and stay focused on the passage that you are reading as long as you feel like it, focusing on this passage until it no longer inspires you. Afterward, take another passage and do the same thing, reading no more than 1/2 a page at a time. It is not the amount you read, but the way you read, that counts. People who rush through will not really profit. They are like bees that can only draw the nectar of flowers while at rest, and not while moving around them. To read a lot is for intellectual pursuits rather than mystical ones. In order to profit by reading spiritual books, you must read them in this way. And I am convinced that once one learns how to read this way, one will get used to it and will be very comfortable with it. The other way of prayer is informal meditation, which is done at an appointed hour and not at the time of the meditative reading. I believe it will be good to undertake it this way. After having put oneself in the presence of God by an act of living faith, it is necessary to read something of substance and to stop gently on it, not to reflect, but only as a means of focusing the spirit, observing that the principal task must be to cultivate the presence of God, and that the topic must be sufficient to focus the spirit rather than exercise it through reasoning. This supposes that the living faith, from the bottom of our hearts, in a present God, impels us to focus on our inner being, bringing all of our focus inward rather than on external things. One important consideration from the very beginning is to liberate ourselves from a great many distractions or external stimuli in order to find God, who can only be found inside of us and in our depth, which is the inner sanctum where he lives. He even promises us that if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and will make our abode with him. John 14:23. St. Augustine feels guilty for all the time he lost, not looking for God in this way. Once we are centered within ourselves and are profoundly penetrated by God in our depths, once our senses are all gathered up and drawn inward from the circumference to the depths, which is a bit more difficult at the beginning than after a time, I will say. Once the soul is so gathered into itself, then it can focus gently and sweetly on the truth that is read, not through reasoning a lot about it, but through savoring it, exciting our will through our feelings rather than by our understanding. When we are moved to leave it, we should remain gently in peace, swallowing what was tasted. Like a person chewing an excellent piece of meat, although savoring the taste, it is not until she stops for a moment to swallow that she is nourished. It is the same thing when we feel moved in the spirit. To continue moving forward would be to extinguish the spirit's fire and take away food for the soul. It is necessary to swallow that which the individual has chewed and tasted through a small, loving pause, full of respect and confidence. This method is quite necessary, and will help the soul more and in less time than with other ways taking many years. But as I have already said, the direct and principal focus must be on the vision of God's presence. We must be most faithful in recalling this truth when we begin to lose our focus. This is a simple and effective way to combat distractions because, if we try to combat distractions directly, we will in fact irritate the situation, making it worse. Instead, we should focus more deeply on a vision of the present God and very simply recollect. Therefore, we combat these distractions indirectly and without thinking, which is a very effective method. Let me warn newcomers not to run from truth to truth, from subject to subject, but to stay with one thought for as long as they are so moved. This is the way to penetrate these truths easily, to taste them, and to have them make their impression. I say that it is difficult in the beginning to focus inward and recollect because of our habit of focusing outward. But when a person gets used to this violence that one does to oneself through practice, it becomes very easy, as much because the person develops the habit as because God, whose only desire is to be in direct contact with his creation, sends the person abundant grace and a desire to experience his presence quite easily. 3. For those who cannot read. Those who cannot read are not deprived of the chance for contemplative prayer. Jesus Christ is the great book, written on both the inside and the outside, which will teach all things. Those who cannot read must practice this method. First, they must learn a fundamental truth, which is that the kingdom of God is within you, Luke 17:21, and it is there they must look. Pastors should teach contemplative prayer to their parishioners, just as they teach them the catechism. Their parishioners were created for this end, and they are not taught to enjoy their end. They need to have this method taught to them. Let them begin by a deep act of adoration and emptying themselves before God, and after that let them attempt to close the eyes of the body and to open the eyes of the soul as they focus inward, and by directly focusing on the presence of God, by the living faith that God is in them, without drawing from their outside strength or senses, let them be held so tightly in this prayer that they are captive. In this way, let them pray the Our Father, perhaps understanding little of what they are saying, but thinking that God is within them and wants to be their Father. In this state, let them make their little requests to him, and after having pronounced this word Father, let them remain for a moment in deeply respectful silence, waiting for God to let them know his will. At other times, seeing themselves as children, dirty and spoiled by their shortcomings, having the force neither to sustain themselves nor to cleanse themselves, let them present themselves to their Father in a humble and confused manner, mixing together words of love and pain, then resting in silence. After the Our Father, praying to this King of Glory to reign in them, abandoning themselves to him to the point that they give up some of the rights they hold for themselves, they should then remain in silence. Afterward, they can continue with another request. If they feel inclined to peace and silence, let them not continue, but remain in this state as long as they are so moved, after which they continue on to the second request, that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Thus they will desire that God's will be done in them and through them. They give their will and their freedom to God, so as to be his instrument. Then, seeing that the main object of their will must be to love, they will want to love, and will ask God for his love, but in a gentle and peaceful way. They continue with the rest of the Our Father, with the help of clergy to instruct them. They should not attempt to recite much of the Our Father or the Ave, but when they do recite it, they should recite it well. At other times they should be like sheep with their shepherd, and ask him for their true food. O shepherd, you give the nourishment of yourself, and it is daily bread. They could also pray for their family's needs, but this should be done through this perspective of direct and essential faith that God is in us. God is nothing like what one imagines him to be, but a living faith in his presence suffices. They should not form any image of God in their minds, although one can do so of Jesus Christ, looking at him crucified, or as a child, or in another state or mystery, provided that the soul is still searching for it. At other times they should look at him like a doctor and show him their ills so that he can heal them, but they should always do this without effort and with a bit of silence from time to time, in order that there is more and more silence rather than action, so that in the end, by giving more and more over to God's ways, they will profit, as I will explain in the following passage. When the presence of God is given, and the soul begins gradually to taste silence and rest, this experiential taste of God's presence introduces the soul to the second degree of contemplative prayer, after having started at the first degree appropriate for those who can read and for those who cannot, as already mentioned. 4. The second degree of contemplative prayer. The second degree is called by some contemplation, and by others the prayer of simplicity. This latter term might be more appropriate than contemplation, which is more refined and done by others. When the soul has been engaged in the way we have seen, after a period of time it feels, little by little, that it is given a facility with becoming attached to God. It begins to recollect more easily. Inward prayer becomes effortless, sweet, and pleasant. The soul knows the path to finding God. It smells the scent of his perfumes. Thus, now it is necessary to change the method so that the soul, through fidelity and courage, does what I am about to explain without being surprised at what will be required. First, as soon as the soul finds itself in the presence of God, through faith, and focuses inward, let it stay for a moment like this in respectful silence. If, from the beginning, while performing this act of faith, it has a small inkling of the presence of God, let the soul stay in that place as long as this feeling remains, without being troubled or trying to move beyond this point, and let it keep what was given to it for as long as it remains. If this feeling leaves, let the soul stir up its will by some tender affection, and if from this first affection the soul finds itself back in gentle peace, let it remain there. Likewise, it is necessary to blow upon the fire gently, and, as soon as it is lit, to stop blowing, because to continue to blow would be to extinguish the fire. I ask that you never perform contemplative prayer without remaining in respectful silence for a time at the end. It is of great consequence that the soul approach contemplative prayer with courage, that it carry with it pure and unselfish love. Let the soul never approach this type of worship in order to get something from God, but instead to please him and do his will. For a servant who only serves if he is rewarded does not deserve to be rewarded. Approach contemplative prayer not in order to feel good, but in order to be with God as he wishes. This means that you will be the same as much in times of dryness as in times of abundance, and that you will be surprised neither by God's silence nor by periods of dryness. 5. Dryness. As God has no desire other than to give himself to a loving soul who wants to search for him, he often hides himself in order to reveal the soul's laziness and to force it to look for him with love and steadfastness. But with what goodness is the steadfastness of the beloved rewarded, and how many apparent absences are rewarded with loving caresses! You might believe that it is a mark of utmost steadfastness and love to look for our beloved by exerting your mind, strength, or action to make him return. No, believe me, dear souls, that is not the way of this method. It is necessary to have loving patience, humble, lowered eyes, a frequent but peaceful affection, and a respectful silence as you wait for the return of your beloved. You will show him, by this way of acting, that it is him alone whom you love, and whom you want to please, not the pleasure that you will experience through loving him. That is why it is said, "Humble your heart and endure. Incline your ear and receive the words of understanding, and do not be impatient in the time of obscurity. Wait on God with patience. Join yourself to God and endure, that your life may be increased in the latter end. Take all that is brought upon you, and in your sorrow endure, and in your humiliation keep patience." Ecclesiasticus 2:2-6. Be patient in inward prayer, and have nothing else in your life other than waiting for the return of your beloved in patience with a humble, abandoned, resigned, and joyful spirit. Oh, excellent contemplative prayer! You can mix loving pleadings into it. Oh, how this procedure charms the heart of God and obliges him to return more than any other. 6. Abandonment. Giving all of oneself and all that one possesses begins here. All we need is to convince ourselves strongly that all that happens to us from moment to moment represents the order and the will of God. This conviction will make us content with all things and will make us see all that happens to us as coming from God and not from his creatures. I entreat you, my dear brothers and sisters, wanting to give yourselves to God, whoever you might be, not to take yourself back once you have given yourself to him, and to think that once this is given, it is no longer at your disposal. Abandonment is what really matters on this path, and it is the key to inner life. The one who knows how to abandon himself will soon be perfect. It is then necessary to hold firm to this commitment without listening to reason and without thinking about it. Great faith makes for great abandonment. It is necessary to trust in God, believing in hope against hope. Romans 4:18. Abandonment is giving up all care for ourselves in order to leave ourselves entirely to God's way. All Christians are exhorted to give themselves up to God, because for everyone it is said, "Be not therefore solicitous for tomorrow will be solicitous for itself." Matthew 6:34. Lay open your works to the Lord, and your thoughts will be directed. Proverbs 16:3. Commit your way to the Lord, and trust in him, and he will do it. Psalm 37:5. Abandonment to God's will must be, as much on the outside as on the inside, a total surrendering and putting of your life into God's hands, forgetting yourself and thinking only of God. In this way, the heart remains always free, joyous, and detached. In practice, lose all of your own will unceasingly in the will of God, and renounce all specific inclinations, however good they might appear. As soon as you feel them begin, make yourself indifferent, and only desire what God has desired from the beginning of time. Be indifferent to all things, whether for the body or for temporal and eternal goods. Let the past be forgotten. Leave the future to providence, and give the present to God. Let us be happy in the present moment, carrying in it the eternal order of God for us. The moment is an infallible declaration to us of the will of God, being inevitable and shared by all. Do not attribute any part of what happens to the world, but look at all things through God, and look at them as infallibly coming from his hand, with the exception of our own sin. Let yourselves, then, be led to God as he pleases, either through the interior or through the exterior. 7. Suffering. Be happy about all that God will make us suffer. If you love him, you must love him on Calvary, just as on Mount Tabor, since it is the place where he makes love most evident. Do not be like those people who give of themselves one moment and then take themselves back at another. They give themselves in order to be caressed, and take themselves back when they are crucified, or they look to the world for consolation. No, you will not find any consolation there, dear souls, but only in the love of the cross, and in giving yourselves totally to God. Oh, the person who does not have any inclination to follow the cross has no inclination to follow God. It is impossible to love God without loving the cross, and a heart having a taste for the cross will find the bitterest things sweet, joyful, and pleasurable. A soul that is full shall tread upon the honeycomb, and a soul that is hungry shall take even bitter for sweet. Proverbs 27:7. Because the soul finds itself as famished for its God as it is famished for the cross. The cross allows for God, and God allows for the cross. True relinquishing of control and the cross go hand in hand. As soon as you find something that discourages you and brings on suffering, first offer it up to God, and then give yourself up as a sacrifice. You will see that when the cross comes, it will not be as heavy as you would have thought. This does not mean that you will not feel its weight. Some imagine that the only suffering is that of the cross, but actually, to feel suffering is one of the very principles of suffering. Jesus Christ wanted to suffer in the most painful way. Sometimes we carry the cross with weakness, at other times with strength. All should be equal. 8. Mysteries. Some might criticize me that in this method we do not focus on God's mystery. It is quite the opposite. Mysteries are a given to the soul. Jesus Christ, to whom we relinquish ourselves, whom we follow as the way, to whom we listen as the truth, and who loves us like life, John 14:6, imprints himself on our soul and makes it bear all his states in it. To bear all the states of Jesus Christ is much greater than only to consider the states of Jesus Christ. St. Paul bore the states of Jesus Christ on his body. I bear, he says, the marks of the Lord Jesus in my body, Galatians 6:17. But he did not say that he was reasoning about this. Often in this state of abandonment, Jesus Christ gives us views of his states in a very particular way. It is necessary to receive them and apply them wherever God desires. Choosing nothing for ourselves other than to stay with him, we should receive equally, wherever it pleases God, to love him or to deny ourselves before him, as we also receive all that he gives us, light or darkness, facility or sterility, strength or weakness, sweetness or bitterness, temptation or distraction, pain, troubles, uncertainties, none of it should stop us. There are people whom God calls for years at a time to taste one of his mysteries. Simply the sight or thought of this mystery puts them in a contemplative mode. Let them be faithful to it. But when God takes it away from them, let them allow themselves to be deprived of it. Others suffer at having no revelation of God's mystery. Inclination for mystery and love of God are incorporated in this particular kind of devotion. The person who loves God loves all that comes from him. 9. Virtue. This is the short and sure way to acquire virtue, since God is the principle of all virtue. All virtue comes from possessing God. The closer we come to possessing this, the higher our degree of virtue. Moreover, I say that all virtue not coming from within is a mask of virtue, like clothing that falls apart and does not last. But virtue emanating from the depths is essential, true, and permanent. All the glory of the king's daughter comes from within. Psalm 45:13. Of all souls there is none practicing a stronger virtue than these, although they do not particularly think about it as virtue. God, to whom they are held united, makes them practice it in many forms. He does not allow them anything. He does not permit them the least pleasure. What hunger these loving souls have for suffering! How many austerities they undertake, if left to their own desires! They only think about pleasing their beloved God, and they start to neglect themselves and love themselves less. The more they love God, the more they despise themselves, and the more disgust they have for creatures. Oh, if we would learn this method, so simple that it is right for us all, from the most coarse and ignorant to the most educated, how easily the whole Church of God would be reformed. We only have to love. Love, and do what you will. St. Augustine. For when we love, we cannot want to do anything that might displease our beloved. 10. Mortification. I will say once more that it is impossible ever to arrive at perfect mortification of the senses and of the passions by any other way. The very natural reason is that it is the soul that gives strength and vigor to the senses, just as it is the senses that irritate or incite the passions. A dead person has neither sensations nor passions because of the separation existing between the soul and the senses. All the work done on the exterior always impels the soul outwardly toward the things on which it concentrates its efforts. The soul pours itself into them. Having directly applied austerity outwardly, it is fully turned in that direction. Thus, far from deadening the senses, it actually invigorates them. The senses can only be invigorated by the application of the soul, which communicates more life to them to the extent that it is more in them. This life of the senses, far from extinguishing passions, agitates and irritates them. Austerity can weaken the body, but never deadens the effect of the passions or their strength, for the reasons I have just given. The single thing that can accomplish this is the soul turning inward, in order to focus on God, present there. If the soul turns all its strength and force inward, it separates itself from the senses by this single action, and employing all its force and its strength within, it leaves the senses without strength, and the more it advances and approaches God, the more it is separated from itself. That is what happens to people for whom divine grace has a strong attraction. They become weak on the outside, and are often incapacitated. I do not mean by this that mortification is not necessary. However, mortification must always be accompanied by contemplation, and be done according to strengths, the individual's state, and obedience. But I say that one's principal concern must not be mortification. Neither should one become fixated on one austerity or another, but only follow one's inward leading and concern in the presence of God, without focusing on mortification in particular. God causes all sorts of them, and he does not give any relief whatsoever to souls who are faithful in giving themselves up to him, so as to mortify all there is to mortify in them. All that is necessary is to stay attentive to God, and everything happens perfectly. Not everyone is capable of outward austerity, but everyone is capable of this. There are two senses that one cannot mortify enough, sight and hearing, because these are the ones that produce all the forms of thought. God makes this happen. We only have to follow his Spirit.
The soul enjoys a double advantage through this conduct. In the same measure that it is pulled away from the outside, it approaches God. In approaching God, apart from the fact that a secret strength and virtue are communicated to it, support it, and preserve it, the soul distances itself all the more from sin while approaching God, and enjoys ongoing conversion. 11. Conversion. Return as you had deeply revolted, O children of Israel. Isaiah 31:6. Conversion is nothing more than turning from the world in order to return to God. Conversion is only half perfect, albeit good and valuable for salvation, when it is simply turning from sin to grace. To be complete, there must be a turning away from the outside and a turning inward. The soul, once turned toward God, has a great capacity to stay converted to God. The longer it stays converted, the more it moves toward God and becomes attached to Him. And the more it moves toward God, the more it necessarily moves away from the creature, which is opposed to God. So much is the soul fortified in this conversion that the act of conversion becomes normal and natural. We must know, however, that this does not happen by a violent exertion by the creature. The only exertion that it could or should make is through grace, making an effort to turn and recollect itself inwardly, after which a person only has to live turned toward God in continual adherence. God has an attractive virtue, which always pulls the soul more strongly toward Him, and which, by pulling the soul in this way, purifies it, just as we see the sun draw a thick vapor up toward itself, until gradually the sun pervades it and purifies it, without any effort on the part of the vapor other than to let itself be drawn up while approaching the sun and leaving itself. There is, however, this difference, that vapor is not drawn freely and does not voluntarily follow, as the soul does. This way of turning inward is very easy and advances the soul quite naturally, without effort, because God is our depths. The depths always have a very strong attractive virtue. The more the depths are eminent and spiritual, the more their attraction is violent and impetuous, unable to be stopped. More than the attractive virtue of the depths, all worldly creatures are given a strong inclination to reconnect with their depths in such a way that the most spiritual and perfect have this leading more strongly. As soon as a thing is turned toward its depths, unless some strong and vigorous force stops it, it moves in that direction with force. A stone thrown into the air is no sooner let go than it turns toward the earth that pulls it there by its own weight, as toward its depths. It is the same with water and fire, which, being left alone, move incessantly toward their depths. But I say that the soul, by the effort that it puts forth to focus inwardly, turned toward the central leaning, falls toward its depths without any other effort than the weight of love. And the longer it remains peaceful and still, without any inner movement, the more it advances with speed, because it gives a place to this attractive and sensual virtue in order to be drawn forcefully. All our care, then, should be to focus inwardly as much as possible, not being surprised at the effort that we might need to do this exercise. It soon will be rewarded by remarkable cooperation on the part of God, who will make it easy, provided that we are faithful, bringing our hearts gently and sweetly through a small, gentle, and calm returning, and through tender and peaceful affection when our soul is troubled by distractions and preoccupations. When passions rise, a gentle turning back to God, who is present, will easily put them out. All other resistance irritates these passions. 12. On contemplation of the simple presence of God. As we have seen, the soul faithful to this exercise, through affection and love of its God, is completely astonished that gradually it feels that He takes total possession of the soul itself. His presence becomes so easy that the soul enjoys it continuously. It receives it by habit, as well as through the act of contemplation. The soul feels the calm gradually take hold all by itself. Silence constitutes all its contemplative prayer, and God infuses it, which is the beginning of ineffable happiness. Oh, if I could pursue the infinite degrees to follow! But I must stop here, since this is only for beginners, while waiting for God to bring forth what could be useful to all the states. We need to be satisfied, saying that it is of utmost importance to stop individual action and agency in order to let God operate. Be still and see that I am God. Psalm 46:10. God himself told us through David. But the creature is so in love with what it does that it believes that it is not doing anything if it cannot feel, know, or recognize its operation. It cannot see that the speed of its race does not allow the individual steps to be seen, and that the work of God, becoming more abundant, absorbs the work of the creature, just as we see the sun, as it rises, absorb bit by bit the light of the stars, which were quite visible before sunrise. It is not from a lack of light that we cannot see the stars any more, but rather from an excess of light. The same is true here. The creature no longer distinguishes its operation because a strong general light absorbs all the individual small lights and makes them completely fade away because the excessive light surpasses all. In the same way, those who criticize contemplation as being an act of laziness are making a big mistake, and it is through lack of experience that they say such a thing. Oh, if they would make an effort! In a little time they would be experienced and knowledgeable. I say then that this lack of action does not come from deficiency, but from abundance. A person with experience would know that. This person will know that it is not a barren silence caused by deficiency, but a silence full and devoted, caused by abundance. David felt it when he said, "For he is my God and my Savior. He is my protector. I shall be moved no more. In God alone there is rest for my soul." Psalm 62:2. Two different kinds of people are quiet, the one from having nothing to say, and the other from having too much to say. It is the same here. We keep quiet because of excess, not lack. Water causes two different kinds of death. One person dies of thirst, the other drowns. The one dies from scarcity, the other from abundance. Here, abundance causes certain operations to stop. It is therefore important to stay silent in this way for as long as one can, just as a small child attached to his mother's breast shows us sensibly. He starts to move his little lips to cause the milk to come. But when the milk comes in abundance, he is content to drink it with no more movement. If he does move, it will stop the process. He will cause the milk to spill and will have to stop. In this same way, in contemplative prayer, we need to move our lips through affection. But when the milk of grace flows, there is nothing more to do than to stay at rest, swallowing gently. And when the milk stops coming, we must stir up a little affection as the child moves his lips. The person who does differently will not profit from this grace. What will happen to this child who drinks the milk gently, in peace, without moving? Who would believe that he is getting nourishment in this way? The more he nurses in peace, however, the more the milk will do him good. What happens to this child? He will fall asleep at his mother's breast. While in inward prayer, the peaceful soul can often fall into mystical sleep, wherein all the powers are quiet until they enter by their state into that which is fleetingly given to them. You see that the soul is led here naturally, without any discomfort, without thought, without artifice. The interior is not a stronghold taken by the cannon, but instead by love. Thus, gently following this process in this manner, natural inward prayer will soon occur. God does not ask anything extraordinary or too difficult. On the contrary, a very simple and childlike procedure will please him extremely. All the greatest things in religion are the easiest. The most necessary sacraments are the simplest. It is the same with natural things. Would you like to go to the sea? Get on a river, and without noticing and without effort, you will arrive there. Would you like to go to God? Take this sweet path, so easy, and in a little while you will arrive in a way that will amaze you. Oh, if you would just try this, you would soon see that very little has been said about the experience, and that your experience goes well beyond where people said it would. What are you afraid of? Let yourself be thrown promptly into the arms of love, who stretched them out on the cross just to be able to receive you. What risk can there be in trusting God and giving yourself to Him? It will not trick you, but is a pleasant way, giving you much more than you expected. But those who have expected everything from themselves might hear this reproach that God makes through Isaiah. You have been wearied by the multitude of your ways, yet you did not say, I will rest.
Isaiah 57:10. 13. Rest. The soul, having arrived at this point, needs no preparation other than rest, because it is here that the continual presence of God, the fruit of contemplation, begins to be infused almost continually. The soul enjoys, in its innermost self, an inestimable happiness. It finds that God is more in the soul than the soul is itself. It only has to do one thing, to find this presence, to look inward. As soon as a person closes his eyes, he will be taken up and engaged in contemplative prayer. The soul is amazed at this great gift, and thus begins a conversation that the exterior does not interrupt. We can say the same thing about contemplative prayer that the Book of Wisdom says, "Now all good things came to me together with her." Wisdom 7:11. For virtues run joyfully in this soul that practices in a manner so easy that it seems to be completely natural. This way carries a seed of life and fertility, nourishing the soul in all that is good and rendering it insensitive to all that is bad. Let the soul stay constantly in this state, guarding itself against looking for a method other than simple rest, whether it is in confession, communion, action, or contemplation. There is nothing more to do than let oneself be filled with a divine infusion. I do not mean to speak of the formal preparation to take the sacraments, but only of the necessary internal disposition in taking them. 14. Silence. Be subject to the Lord and pray to him. Psalm 37:7. The reason that inward silence is necessary is that the Word, being eternal and essential, needs the soul to have its same disposition in order for the soul to receive it. But it is certain that to receive the Word we must lend an ear and listen. Hearing is the sense made to receive the Word communicated to it. Hearing is a passive sense and not an active one, receiving and not communicating. The soul must be attentive to the Word communicating to it and reviving it. This is why there are so many examples from Scripture exhorting us to listen to God and to be attentive to his voice. We can cite many passages. Let us limit ourselves to the following. Listen to me, O my people, and give ear to me. Isaiah 51:4. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, all the remnant of the house of Israel, who are carried by my bowels, are borne up by my womb. Isaiah 46:3. Listen, O daughter, and see, and incline your ear, and forget your people and your father's house, and the king shall greatly desire your beauty. Psalm 45:10-11. It is necessary to listen to God and to be attentive to him, forgetting oneself and all interest in other things. These two actions, or rather passions, since they are completely passive, attract the love of beauty that he himself communicates. Listen and be attentive. Forget yourself. Outward silence is quite necessary for the cultivation of inner silence, and it is impossible to become inward without loving silence and retreating. God tells us by the mouth of his prophet, I will allure her, and will lead her into the wilderness, and I will speak to her heart. Hosea 2:14. How to be focused on God and be preoccupied with 1,000 trifles? That is impossible. When weakness impels you to be busy on the outside, you need to make a little detour back inside. We need to remember to do this in all times of distraction and inattention. This means engaging in a little bit of contemplative prayer and focusing inward for 1/2 hour or 1 hour, if one does not remain continually in an attitude of devotion and in contemplative prayer during the whole day. 15. Confession and self-examination. Self-examination must always precede confession, but it must conform to the state of the soul. Those performing this act must show themselves before God, who will not fail to enlighten them and make them know the nature of their faults. This self-examination must necessarily be done in peace and tranquility, expecting more of God than of our own efforts in understanding our sins. When we examine ourselves with our own effort, we misunderstand ourselves easily. We believe that good is bad, and bad is good. An egotistical love easily tricks us. But when we stay exposed to God's eyes, it is like the sun exposing the smallest particles. It is therefore necessary to give oneself up to God often, as much for self-examination as for confession. As soon as one is engaged in this type of contemplative prayer,
God does not fail to admonish the soul for all of its faults. As soon as the soul has committed a fault, it feels a burning. This is an examination that God does, letting nothing escape, and the soul only has to turn itself to God, suffering the pain and correction that he brings about. Since this examination is continual on God's part, the soul can no longer examine itself. It faithfully abandons itself to God and will be better examined by his light than by all of its own efforts. And the experience makes him know it well. Regarding confession, be warned of one thing. That is, inward-looking people will often be surprised that, while approaching the confessional and confessing their sins, instead of feeling the accustomed regret and contrition, they feel a sweet and tranquil love emanating from their heart. Those who are not instructed want to get an active contrition out of this because they have heard that this is necessary, which is true, but they will not see that they are losing a true act of contrition, which is innate love, infinitely greater than an act they could perform by themselves. They have a substantial act, although they do not have the formal one. Let them not be burdened trying to do this, when God does it in them, by them, and for them. To hate sin in this way is to hate it as God hates it. It is the purest love that God uses in this way, such that the soul does not hurry to act but remains just as it is. In the words of the sage, trust in God and stay in your place. Ecclesiasticus 11:22. The soul will also be amazed that it will forget its faults, and that it will have trouble remembering them. This should not cause worry for two reasons. The first is that this forgetting is a mark of purification from the fault. It is best to forget ourselves, so as only to remember God. The second reason is that when it is confession time, God does not miss showing the soul its biggest shortcomings. So God himself makes the examination, and the soul will see that it will come out all the better than it would by its own best efforts. This does not work for those in earlier stages of instruction, where the soul, being outwardly focused, must use its own efforts to do all things, according to its stage of advancement. For souls at this degree, let them hold on to what they are told and not change their simple preoccupations. It is the same for communion. Souls should let God act and remain silent. God cannot be better received than through God. 16. Reading and spoken prayer. The way to read contemplatively is when the reader feels a little inward tug. This person should stop reading and wait peacefully, reading little and not continuing, unless feeling drawn to it. The soul is not called into interior silence through taking up vocal prayers, but instead by saying little. And when it says these prayers, if it finds it difficult and feels drawn to silence, let the soul stay there, and let it not make any effort unless the prayers are required. In that case, it would be necessary to continue. But if they are not necessary, then it feels itself drawn away, and it has trouble saying them. Let the soul not be bothered, and not be bound to them, but let the soul be drawn to the Spirit of God, which will satisfy all obligations in a very complete manner. 17. Requests. The soul will find itself incapable of making prayer requests as it did so easily before. This should not be surprising, because likewise the Spirit also helps our infirmity, for we know not what we should pray for as we ought. But the Spirit himself asks for us with unspeakable groanings. Romans 8:26-27. Let me say more. It is necessary to support God's plans, which are to empty the soul of its own operations in order to replace them with his will. Let this happen, and do not let yourself be bound to anything. Although it seems good for you, it is not, because it takes you away from God's will. Indeed, God's will is preferable to all other good. Practice detachment from the world and live to give yourself up to God and faith. It is here that faith begins to operate excellently in the soul. 18. Faults. As soon as a person experiences a fault or a turning away from God, it is necessary to focus inward, because this fault has turned us away from God, and as soon as possible we must turn ourselves to him and suffer any penance he gives us. It is very important not to become concerned by these faults, because this concern comes from a secret pride, and a love of ourselves as special. We are hurt by sensing what we are. If we feel discouraged, we further weaken ourselves, and thinking about a fault brings us greater distress than the fault itself did. A truly humble soul is not surprised by its own shortcomings. The more it sees itself as miserable, the more it gives itself to God and tries to stay with him, understanding how much it needs God's help. We should follow this way, moreover, because God himself told us to do so. I will give you understanding, and I will instruct you in this way, in which you will go. I will fix my eyes upon you. Psalm 32:8. 19. Distractions and temptations. Regarding distraction or temptations, instead of fighting them directly, which will only augment the problem and draw the soul away from its adherence to God's will, which must be our main concern, the soul must simply turn its gaze and move closer and closer to God, like a child who, seeing a monster, tries neither to fight it nor to look at it, but only turns to his mother's bosom where he finds comfort. God is in the midst of it. It shall not be moved. God will help it in the morning early. Psalm 46:5. Doing otherwise because we are weak and think that we are attacking our enemies, we often find ourselves wounded instead, or even utterly defeated. But remaining in the simple presence of God, we find ourselves instantly strengthened. It was that way with David. I set, he said, the Lord always in my sight, for he is at my right hand, that I shall not be moved. Therefore, my heart has been glad, and my tongue has rejoiced. Psalm 16, 8-9. It is said in Exodus, the Lord will fight for you, and you will hold your peace. Exodus 14:14.